bring the church to you. And that's the whole point with all this. It's like people don't just walk into church anymore. We have to bring it to them.
There's so many things that keep you dependent on this system. It could be an organized religion. It could be kind of those things that you have to return to over and over again until you become the hunter. You go out and seek. You find that freedom. You walk. You gather.
Lead gen wasn't even something I was trying to start. It was literally just for my flipping. And then now all of a sudden it was so good that our students wanted it.
I don't want people to talk about my sobriety date or the things. It was a decision day that I made to get free of this thing in my life that was causing all this chaos. Welcome back to the Real Rehab, and I've got I won't say a good friend, but a good acquaintance of mine, and we've had some things here and there, and I slipped into his DMs with a charity cause a couple of years ago, and asked Ryan if he would come in and just talk on the Real Rehab. And this guy is super successful all the way around. He's had a great journey from professional baseball to influencer on the real estate side, and so thanks for taking the time here in Vegas to cut this up with us, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks for coming out.
Absolutely.
Man, thanks for letting us invade your home also. Right? This is your studio, but thank you. Well, dude, we started this podcast with the goal of really diving into not just transformational stories, but for entrepreneurs, for people that have really kind of had to navigate life's toughest turns, but like figure out how to pull themselves out. And that's kind of the cool stories. And I feel like every time I've looked over the last few years, you're starting something new or you got something cooking, and it's cool to see you. So I think we would just love to dive into it and really kind of figure out and pick your brain on some of these things that you've done.
Yeah, I've definitely had to go through many different things in my life. So I got a million different stories I could share.
Yeah. What was the transition like from professional ball into the real estate, the investor space? Like what was that transformational time in your life?
Yeah, I say that there's probably only one time I would say I was like depressed. I never dealt with depression or anything like that. But I remember when I got released by the Oakland A's, this was after my third season. So it was in spring training of 2013. I got released and they're basically like, dude, you're just not good enough. When you're a 23, 24-year-old kid and like, that's all you've done your entire life. And at this point, I'm not successful in anything else. Like I hadn't had success in real estate or being an entrepreneur. Yeah. It was baseball or bust. And so that was super difficult to deal with mentally, emotionally. It was for the first time, like I was like, wow, so what am I going to do with my life if baseball's not it? Like I literally don't have any other skills.
Right.
And so that was literally one of the most painful moments of my life, if not the most painful, for sure.
What helped you pivot so successfully, really?
Well, I think for me, everything comes back to faith. And it's just like, at the end of the day, as a Christian, as a believer, I knew that God had a plan for me. I mean, he says that in Romans 8:28 that, everything is for your good,
Right.
Whether it's tough, whether it's a celebration, as long as you're a believer, everything's for your good. And so, I always kept that in the back of my mind. I'm like, hey, I don't know why I'm going through this. I don't know why this isn't working out, but it's going to work out for my good. I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know how long I'm going to have to wander, but, it'll work out. And so I think that was number one. And then number two was just like, all right, well, I can sit here and mope. And I think I moped for like a week. I sat there for a week, just really like, having a pity party, saying, oh, it wasn't fair, because it truly wasn't fair. Yeah. Like, I had people that were higher drafted guys, but I outperformed them, and they got more opportunities. They didn't get released. I got released because I just, didn't sign for as much money. I mean, that was the facts of it. And, I tried to make all the excuses in the world about how it wasn't fair, and then finally, after a week, I'm just like, dude, it doesn't matter.
Were you already married at this time?
No.
Okay.
And that was a whole nother thing, too. I was engaged, and, it's like, hey, babe, I'm going to get to the big leagues, and this is going to be our life. And it's like, hey, this is probably not going to be our life. So, yeah, there was a lot of stuff going on, man.
And so what was the transition? I mean, so you moped for a week.
Yeah. Well, what ended up happening was I ended up getting a call to play for another team. Now, this is what we'd call independent baseball, so it's outside of affiliated baseball. So affiliated baseball would be all the 30 major league teams and their farm systems and everything else. And so what happens is if they release you and no one signs you, there are still other professional leagues out there. And they've got all these guys who used to play in the bigs, who were at AAA, whatever, right? And they're still playing, hoping to put up a big year, get seen, and get signed again. And I really didn't want to do that because the odds are once you go to that of getting picked back up are extremely low. And so for me, I was like, I don't want to do that. Like, I already got released. You know, nobody wants me. Why? But, you know, from the encouragement of actually my then fiance, now wife, my parents, they're all like, dude, you've already trained the whole off season. Why not just play one more season and see how it goes? You're already ready. They want you. It's an opportunity. And I was like, you know what? You guys are right. Like, I'm letting my pride talk and basically say there's no way this works. But the truth of the matter is I don't have anything else to do. So I might as well go do it. And so I went and did it. Went out to Fargo, North Dakota. Got traded like after a month to a team in Dallas, Texas. And I actually had the best time of my life. I had more fun in that year than the previous 3 years with Oakland because that league was more merit-based because no one had a big signing bonus. Everybody could be cut the next day. It was like, yo, you perform or you don't. And so I was performing, and I was, you know, one of the top guys on the team, and I got to play every day. And that's really what had gotten me a little upset with baseball was like I didn't get to play every day. I didn't feel like I got a fair shot. But now I had a fair shot.
I've always wondered if you have like extreme, awesome disciplines. Like I feel like to accomplish a lot of the things that you've accomplished, especially to be a ball player, like have your disciplines always been awesome? Like just your drive for excellence?
Yeah, I think I was born this way because even when I look back at like when I was a kid, I was always that way. Like I'd tell my dad, I'm like, dude, take me to the park. Like take me to the cage. Like I want to go. He didn't force me to do anything.
Right.
You know what? Even schoolwork, I was like, well, okay, I got all my homework. It's Monday. How about I just knock it all out right now and I don't have to do homework the rest of the week? That was, I just intuitively wanted to do that even as an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think I was born this way, and I think it's carried over into everything in my life where, like, anything I've ever wanted to do, I've just wanted to be the best. And it's not even that, like, I want to be the best and I'm competing with this person, but it's like, yeah, I want to literally just do this to the best of my ability, whatever that is.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So if you take that with the influencer space, and I don't know what you experienced on your rise up in this space, where was that in that transition of, is it you against you? Did you have comparison when you were going through it early on?
Yeah, I think there's both. You know, when I was playing baseball, yes, it's still you against you, but you're competing against somebody else.
Right.
Who's competing against you and themselves.
Right.
But the thing is, I don't need somebody else to fail for me to, you know, ascend. So I think that's a big difference from when you're truly competing in a sport where there's one winner and one loser.
Right.
And so we got to go head to head, and only one of us wins. It doesn't work that way in business. It didn't even work that way necessarily in sports because we were all trying to get to the big leagues, you know? So I've always had a mix of both. And I've also always had an appreciation for people who were way better than me because I got to see just ultra talented people who were clearly, I'm just not on their level. And I was never jealous. I was never envious. I'm just like, whoa, there's levels to this. I need to like get better. And, you know, when you go watch a guy like right now, you know, the Dodgers versus Yankees now, it's like you go watch Ohtani and you're just like, dude, this is unreal.
It's
like I can't believe this guy exists, that God created somebody this good at everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Who do you favor in the World Series now?
Dodgers.
Yeah.
When you have the best player, like literally to ever walk the planet,
Right.
I'm going to go with that guy.
Yeah. And I just like him now. Yeah, I mean, like,
Yeah.
he's fun. He's fun to watch.
Yeah, he's the man.
It's pretty incredible.
In your journey, you know, through the business side, the influencer side, all the things you've created, what have you created that it failed, but then you pick back up, and how do you take those failures and learn from them?
Well, I've created a lot of things that have failed. You know, it's funny, right? They say it only takes one business to like make it, right? So, you hear all these stories of entrepreneurs, especially early on, trying this business and that business and this business. And, they all are failures. And then finally that led to the one big success. And then that becomes the thing that they went all in on and really did great. Very few times do you have entrepreneurs who are like very good at multiple things, especially simultaneously. It's actually extremely rare. And so for me, I ended up on a weird journey where, I was kind of an outlier from the get-go in that everything I touched turned to gold, like out the gate. And it was like, oh, I flip couches and like I'm just super good at this. Oh, I get into starting a brokerage and we have 200 agents without really trying. And then, oh, I'm flipping houses, making millions of dollars and, ends up working out great. Then I do coaching and I become an influencer. Then I built a multi-million-dollar tax firm and you're just like, everything is just winning. And, I say all that to say, there's a couple of things I learned before I had to deal with losers. So number one was, as talented as I was, I also think that but the businesses, myself, whatever, was in a unique time in the market where everything was successful.
Okay.
Right? I mean, you go into 2020, and I shouldn't say that because, I started in 2015 as I'm building this. But when I started to build a lot of things was really in 2020 to 22, where they're printing infinite amounts of money.
Yeah.
Really hard to lose as a real estate anything.
Right.
Like it's the hottest thing. Everybody's making money. Lenders, realtors, investors, coaches. Everybody's making. Nope. If you lost money, I don't even know what to tell you if you lost money during that time. Like, it was really hard to do. So anyways, I say all that because as good as I was, I also didn't realize the environment I was in also was like aiding me significantly. So that's one thing. So anyways, as we all know, interest rates double, in 22. So real estate starts to turn to crap. Doesn't make me a bad real estate investor. It's just like, this is what it is.
Right.
Like, this is a downturn. Everybody's going to, take a hit. Like, so that becomes one thing. Then I started a couple other things that didn't work out. So I started an e-commerce company. That ended up being a massive nightmare and, successful initially. And then even with that, industry changed, Basically everything we were doing was no longer allowed. And even then, there's a whole bunch of crap I could go into with that. But long story short, no matter how good I was at trying to fix it and solve it, the industry wouldn't allow it. It just was impossible to fix. It's kind of like, I guess, lenders who were doing all their refinances. And it's like when rates double, I don't care how good you were at prospecting and there's nothing you're going to do.
Right.
The market's just not going to allow it. And I kind of realized, too, at that time that you could be the best entrepreneur in the world, but when you're in a market or in an industry that's, quote unquote, dying or in a recession or whatever, it doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter. Like, your market environment is going to dictate so much more than anything else. Well, I don't want to say that because you got to be good. This is assuming you're good, right?
That's fair.
Yeah, because if you're bad, it doesn't matter. Right? But if you're good and I sell newspapers and you're in AI, probably the guy in AI is going to win.
Right.
Because they're going to have wind at their back with everything in. No matter what, if we're equally talented, you just picked a better market, right? So that became a thing, For example, I launched an NFT, and it was actually the most successful real estate NFT ever, period. And it's just like we did more than Gary Vee. We did more than everything, right? And it's just like, all right, well, the whole NFT market crashed. Like 99% of them dropped to zero. Like, what do you want me to do?
Right.
I can't revive an entire market. So at the end of the day, too, what I realized was some of my failures, there's absolutely things I could do better when there is a failure, right? But sometimes there are things that are out of your control and you just picked a bad deal and it is what it is. And so I learned that through some of the failures. And then, you try other things as well that aren't like I would call necessarily failures. You just realize they're not really worth it.
Juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Yeah, it's like, couch flipping was not a failure. It was great. It just wasn't worth it. And so I stopped doing it after I found better things.
Right.
We moved my brokerage over to Real. And, I'm like, okay, well, I can keep my current, this is the thought process, right? I could have kept my current brokerage locally in Las Vegas, and we could have grown it just slow because Vegas has a cap. It is what it is. I have nationwide influence. Yep. If we go to one of these downline type brokerages, I no longer have liability anymore, and I can go recruit everywhere. Okay, well, let's go for the home run. We went for the home run, didn't work out. It's just like I don't even say people didn't want to do it. I don't want to get into why it didn't work out, but it just didn't work out, not due to anything I did.
Right.
Okay. Due to what they were going to allow me to do and didn't allow me to do once we did it. So nonetheless, it's like, well, what do you do? Like it didn't work. We took a shot at going for a home run because in my mind, it was like you stay here and you're going to just keep doing this, or you go for this and it could 10X, but it could also not work.
Yeah. Right.
I would rather take the 10X gamble. It didn't work out. It's all good.
Spoken truly from the Vegas man.
Yeah. But that's the thing, right? And so now that I've had a lot of successes along with a lot of failures, I look at my life today and my business today, and it's clear like I've just picked the winners. And that's what I think all these entrepreneurs do who or like, let's just say serial entrepreneurs like myself. They try lots and lots of things, and then, they figure out the ones that really work. And so it's like today, I went from maybe having like 8 businesses at any moment to I really have 3 that are just the main things. We still flip and wholesale. Mm-hmm. That's been my thing for 10 years. That'll never go away in my mind. We still have education. So I've been doing that now for 7 years. That probably will never go away in my mind. And now we do lead generation. And lead gen wasn't even something I was trying to start. It was literally just for my flipping.
Right.
And then now all of a sudden it was so good that our students wanted it. And then it was so good that it just now become a thing. And so, in the span of just a couple of months, it turned into a 6-figure or recurring revenue per month business. And now it's like, I think that could go really exponential as time goes on. And those are the main 3 things I focus on in terms of like making money. And that's after doing a whole bunch of other stuff.
What about people in your life through this? Like when you build, you're the influencer, you're the visionary, right? You're obviously surrounded by great people. So what were some of the people that really helped you through, in these ventures?
I think it always comes back down to faith, man. Every time I did something that was successful long-term, I always felt it within my spirit that, hey, this is the move I should be making. Mm. And there would be confirmation from, other believers and people like you're talking about this, like, hey, this is smart. The things that did not work out, I saw an opportunity. I'm like, oh, this could be a big thing. And you do it. But if I was to look back at it honestly, I would say, yeah, there was not really any confirmation from people that mattered. And I didn't necessarily feel like this huge calling to do it. It was more so just like, hey, this is an opportunity. This is what's going on in the world right now. With your skill set, you would crush it. And so I did it. And now when I look at it, it's like, hey, I need to have complete conviction if I'm going to go down a path. And there's a whole bunch of things that I could talk about with partnerships and faith and why all that's super important. But, when you talk about the actual people in my life throughout this, the closest people you have are obviously my wife. You have people within this company. Mm-hmm. And, those are, I have spiritual mentors. I have different business people that, I really trust and confide in when I'm making a move. So, I have a lot of advisors, so I get a lot of feedback on decisions I'm making. And, it's been extremely helpful.
Do you think that a lot of people go into those business ventures unconvicted or with lack of information and they don't have good advisors around them to spitball with and kind of work through?
I think so, but I also think that it depends who you are. So if you're first starting out something, you don't have any advisors, or else you'd probably already be super successful. Just by nature, the more successful you get, usually you attract more talented people around you. So it's like when I was flipping couches, I did not have any advisors. Like it was just like, yeah, this is something I got to do. And that's probably one of the reasons why I didn't like realize I could do lots of other things. I wasn't even seeking out counsel and advisors, right? But nonetheless, I think most people, it would be easy to say, hey, people are just getting into stuff that they don't really understand, and that's why they're failing. And it's true. But I mean, isn't that all of us? I mean, I don't know what it was like for you when you got into real estate, but I'm sure you kind of just dove into it and whatever happened, happened. I mean, there are some people who do it smart and who are like, hey, I'm going to go join a team. I'm going to go get a coach. I'm going to go right from the jump. They do it. Right. But I think those people are the rare ones. Most people are going to try things and fail. And I mean, even then, right? I coach so many people. Okay. I got people who pay $100,000 for one-on-one, and I will tell them things and they're like, I respect that, but I still like want to try doing it this way. And I'll be like, okay, like I'll support you. Like if you want to do it this way, here's how we'll do it. But let's reevaluate it in a month and see how it played out, right? Because I've been down this road. And, like then, it plays out the way I said. And they're like, okay, I should have listened. It's like, but you do have to go through the failure in order to truly learn. Because I'll give you another example. I have this guy, Neil Patel, who's a friend of mine. And, really smart guy. He's on social media, got, millions of followers. He's like 40 years old, if not a billionaire, pretty close to it. This dude is
I've seen him speak a couple of times.
Top 5 smartest people I know. And I remember he told me like 2 years ago, he's like, Ryan, if you just focused on real estate, you'd make way more money with less headaches. I was like, Neil, but I got all this other stuff, man. Like, he's like, yeah. But you would make more if you just did real estate. And I'm like, yeah, but look, I'm going to build this thing and that thing and this thing and that thing. And he's like, okay, whatever. And I'm like, okay. So then, obviously we stay friends, but then I get him back on the podcast like a year and a half later. And at that point, I realized after going through it that he was correct. And I was like, Neil, yeah, I'm going to focus on real estate, dude. Like, but, at the same time, right? And he brought this up too. He goes, Ryan, he goes, and this is where you have to understand like why you do what you do. He goes, for me, all I'm concerned about with my social media and everything else is making money. He's like, so I'm going to optimize for that. He goes, but that's not everyone's, main focus. So you got to ask yourself, when it comes to content, because that's what we were talking about, what's your main focus? And I was like, well, I want to bring people to Jesus. That's my main focus at the end of the day. And he's like, okay, well, there's a lot of real estate guys that need Jesus. That was his first response. And I was like, yeah, that's true. And he's like, but, I understand what you're saying. So he's like, if that's the main focus and, then let it be the main focus and you'll still be able to go make money, but you're not going to optimize it for the way that you could be if real estate was the main focus. And he even said something funny. He's like, and what's funny? He's like, I'm not a real estate guy. You're better at real estate than me. But I like following you and being your friend, not because of real estate, but because of all the other things. And so it just kind of like shows the dynamic of, it's not always so black and white on why you should do something or what the decision is. Sure. Because if I only made real estate content, him and I wouldn't know each other.
Sure. I do feel like and I could totally be wrong in saying this, but I feel like it has almost looked like you've gotten better at surrendering to that trained discernment, right? Of like being able to see in advance, being like, and really that's hearing the Holy Spirit, right? And guiding and adapting and being like, I see how this is going to play out, but being able to align that discernment and listen to it on the front end versus the back end.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that journey of like, I feel like you spent years evaluating in the post and now you're making decisions beforehand.
Yeah.
And it's more like you're a more streamlined version than I got to see a couple years ago when I came with him.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I think it takes two things. One, it takes growing in your spiritual maturity, which has definitely happened. And then two, I think it comes with recognizing that, hey, if this doesn't glorify him, then why are we even doing it? And if I'm only doing something for the simple fact of, well, it makes money, it's an opportunity, then that's a distraction.
Has that changed over the years?
Yeah, for sure.
Because that's one of the things when I reached out to you that I've seen just differences in you, differences in the content, differences in how you show up, and it's just been gradual changes. Was there a time in that as you were creating money in all the different businesses where you struggle a little bit with ego and pride in who you were and who you were becoming?
What's funny is, so we have a core value out there.
Which I love, by the way.
And
super dope.
Yeah, one of them is no ego.
Yep.
And we made that back in 2020. And it's funny because one of my business coaches, he's also a believer. He was standing up for me to somebody else because people talk all types of stuff about you when you're out there, right?
Right.
And they only see clips, right?
Yep.
And so he's like, I know Ryan very intimately. And he's like, the furthest thing he has is an ego. Because they like couldn't believe it. And he's like, you cannot mistake confidence and conviction for ego. Just because he knows what he's saying is correct and he speaks with conviction and everything else doesn't mean he has an ego. It's just truth is not ego, right? And so, when I look at failures and I look at today, I wouldn't say I walk with any less confidence than I did all these years.
Sure.
I think the confidence, I actually think I'm way smarter today than I was then. Like if I were to have an ego, I should have it today because I'm like, wow, what an idiot that I was like 2-3 years ago versus like what I understand today. Like what I was saying back then was not correct. This is like correct. And then hopefully in 3 years again, I think what I'm saying today is stupid. And it's like, hopefully I've grown so much that I'm saying, wow, that wasn't correct. Like actually this is correct. And I think that's the essential piece of really not having an ego. It's being okay getting feedback. It's being okay admitting when you're wrong and when you were incorrect. It's taking correction and then listening to all these things. And so I would say as I was building everything, I mean, maybe there's pride and ego with the accomplishment and how fast it's happening and all those things. But even then, I would say I probably still operate with the same level of confidence and conviction today, where it's like, I know what I'm doing is correct. And in 3 years from now, even if it's not, it's like, it probably should always be that way because you could always do it better, right? In hindsight, you're like, dude, I could have did it. But even then, it's like, well, if you're 80% correct and because it's kind of hard to articulate, but a lot of people want to be 100% correct, and so they have analysis paralysis. Yeah. They're afraid to make a mistake, and so they do nothing. Whereas gunslingers, on the other hand, are like, yo, I'm going on faith. This is going to work out. Let's roll. And so that's how I've always been, where it's like, hey, I know enough information. I 100% believe this is going to work out. And then clearly it's never going to work out the exact way you thought. And then clearly you're going to be wrong sometimes. And that's just kind of part of being an entrepreneur.
No doubt.
I would be curious only because I don't hear a lot about, like, how many kids do you have? You have 1 kid, 2 kids, 3? You have 3 kids?
3, 5 and under. Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Probably have more.
What do you feel like have been like all these? You should have them all.
Yeah.
What do you feel like have been in the last couple of years, some of those biggest lessons from dad life, like into business or vice versa?
Well, I wrote the book, The Wealthy Way, for this particular purpose because so many times we chase our career and we neglect all the other stuff in life, right? And so if I was to say there's 4 main pillars to life, right? There is your finances, which are obviously really important, and it's what we talk about the most because, quite frankly, it is the thing that we're going to spend the most time on in our lives. Like, if you really break down a 24-hour day, most of us are working a third of our life, we're sleeping a third, and then the other third is for everything else.
Right.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. God created us to work. I mean, the first thing he did when he created Adam was he gave him a job. He was like, hey, go tend the fields. He was a landscaper. He's like, go name all the animals, tend them. So like, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with work. I actually think God created us to work.
Yes.
Now, the problem is we kind of like become one-dimensional people. And we just think work is all that matters because that's what people see us and associate our identity with and all those things, right? And so, yeah, finance is one part, but then we also have our faith, we also have our relationships, and then we also have our health. And so what I see a lot of people do is they get so caught up in their career or their investments or whatever that they neglect the other three, right? They're in terrible shape. They don't have any faith, right? They don't read the Bible. They don't pray. They don't go to church. They don't do anything. And then their relationships are strained with their family, their wife, their kids, whatever, right? And this just dawned on me, actually, how important it was once I had my son, my first child. So my son, this was back in 2019, he was born 2 months premature. And we didn't know if he was going to make it. I mean, I'm like, I don't know. Like, this is crazy. Like, we don't even have his room ready. We don't have anything. They're like, yeah, he's coming. Yeah. And so, he ends up being born very premature. They're like, he's going to have a lot of like issues, just so you guys know. And so you guys got to be prepared. And he ended up having to spend 2 months in the NICU. Couldn't breathe, couldn't eat, couldn't do anything. Long story short, we take him home. And, we didn't know at the time, but, today we now know he has autism. He's still nonverbal. He's had to have therapy every week of his life. Therapists come to the house, all these things. I mean, we didn't know that when he was first born, but, we had to do all these things. And so my wife was having a really hard time adjusting to being a stay-at-home mom and
sure. Dealing
with a special needs child who needed so much. And she's just getting overwhelmed. And I remember, when that first happened, and also too during the 2 months in the NICU, that was extremely stressful. I was like, I really need to help her out. I really need to sacrifice time in the business and other things to make sure this happens. And so I started a thing where I was going to call it work from home Wednesdays. And I wasn't even on social media. This was just something I did. I was like, I'm just going to spend the Wednesdays here helping out however I can, and all that. And so I did. And that helped us get through the first year as parents. And towards the end of the year, this was a couple of days before Christmas, he ends up bumping his head. And he gets a knot the size of a tennis ball on his head. So we take him to the ER, and they're like, "No, he's good. Don't worry about it." I'm like, "All right, if you say so." We take him back home. He's super lethargic for a day. I'm like, "He's not good. We got to take him to another hospital." So we take him to another hospital. They do an MRI, and they're like, "Dude, his brain's bleeding. Gosh, we have to get him for brain surgery right now." Oh, and this was on Christmas Eve, or 2 days before. I can't remember, but yeah. Long story short, they take him away. And I'm just praying all night. And I was like, God, I will give it all to you. The businesses, the money, you could have it all. I was like, just make sure that he gets through this. And I will make you the priority, the family, all this other stuff. I'm not worried about the business stuff. And so, obviously he gets through it. The surgery's successful. We get to take him home on Christmas Day, actually. So it was a great present. People didn't know either, but my wife was already pregnant again.
Wow.
During this. So it was a super stressful first year of being a parent.
Yeah, dude, the NICU is a lonely place too. My girl came out 6 weeks early, and it's
super tough.
You're just not prepared for not taking your kid home.
Yeah,
in the mental journey, it's a crazy,
especially on your wife, right?
Yeah,
it's super difficult, and finally take him home, and then we're going into the next year. We're like, wow, okay, that was the toughest year of our lives. All this behind us. COVID happens, and then I'm like, okay. This is interesting. And, that set off a whole different chain of events. But long story short, since then, since making that commitment, everything that I said I was going to do, I did. I didn't stray away from the priorities. I always said, hey, I'm going to work 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. I'm not going to work on the weekends. I'm going to save that for, God and the family and everything else. And that's what everything we've built has been on that schedule. People are like, was there a point when you grinded 80 hours a week? And I'm like, no, it's just been all built this exact way because I made a deal. And God, he heard it, he delivered, and then it was on me to live on faith that it was going to still work. And, even the last couple of years when it's been tough, terrible real estate market, dealing with lawsuits, dealing with all these things, I still didn't deviate from the plan. It's been the same. And guess what? He's delivered me through it. He's given me new innovation and inspiration. And, I've been able to do that. And it's like, even in the tougher times, it actually caused me to draw closer to him in my faith and go deeper and deeper. And I know that I would not have made it through the storm without that. So, whether it's family or faith, and then, health has never been a problem for me. Like, I was always healthy as an athlete, so I've never had to worry about that part of my life, like being in danger. But, all of that to say, I wrote the book to kind of tell people my system for like managing my life and living the wealthy way, not just making money, but all areas of life. And too many people, they don't even understand why they do what they do. They're like, oh, well, I'm going to start a college fund for my kid. Did your kid ask for a college fund?
No, but somebody else told them to do it. So
you're working 80 hours a week so you could start a college fund for your kid. When did they ask for that, right? Same thing. Oh, I'm building this business to get to get financially free. And, my wife, dude, all your wife wants is you to be there. Like, she ain't even asking to be financially free right now. So it's like a lot of times we just do things without even thinking about why we do them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, do you feel like that's because a lot of us don't know who we really are?
Yeah. And I think that a lot of us just look, at the end of the day, the world's going to always change. We as humans are always changing and everything else. But there's got to be things in our life that don't change. So there has to be some level of, hey, this is my foundation, this is my identity and everything else. And so for me, that's in Jesus. And it's been that way ever since I was a kid. And thankfully, like, that identity has grown stronger as the years have gone on. But it's always been the backbone of how I've viewed the world, how I've made decisions and lived my life. And even I'm about to celebrate 11 years of marriage actually this week.
Awesome.
Going to Maui on
congratulations.
Yes. Thank you. And
I spent my 11th anniversary here in Vegas with my wife.
There we go.
We did Garth Brooks at the Wynn.
I get to do that every day. So, but like back to just the point, like, I got married young because I wanted to do it right. I wasn't trying to live together before we got married and do all that. Like, I was trying to live obedient to what God calls a healthy marriage. And that's just always been the backbone. And so I was like, no, we're not going to work on Sundays. I'm not going to force my employees to do that. And what's funny is when you start to like live with conviction and you have a solid foundation in something like that, the fruit speaks for itself. A lot of people are like, well, we're going to miss out. Leads are going to get old. And like, they'll make every excuse in the book. And it's just like, all right, take for example, the best fast food chain in America. Okay. You have Chick-fil-A.
Yep.
These guys don't work on Sunday. They got the friendliest, best customer service in the history of fast food. Their average restaurant, last time I checked, makes like $8 or $9 million a year. The average McDonald's makes like $1 million.
Damn.
Okay. They run laps around the field without even being open 20% less or whatever the number is. Right. And it's just like, clearly, like, when you're obedient to what God calls you to do, he'll reward it. And he promises that in the Bible. And so, for me, it just becomes this thing of, if you have a foundation in which you view the whole world from, that you believe to be true and that is unchanging. And, for me, the only one I would subscribe my life to is Jesus. Other things can change.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't need to be in real estate the rest of my life. Right. I don't need to believe that realtors will be around. AI could take over everyone's job. Social media may not be that important a decade from now. Like, I don't know. I'm willing to change and pivot around all of those things.
Sure. Yeah.
But, the Word of God's been here for thousands of years, and it hasn't, people will say, oh, it hasn't, okay? It's the same today as it was then. And it's like, the life principles, the advice, everything, it works.
Yeah. What would you say to somebody like in their identity? We're just talking about that. They get wrapped up in what they do rather than who they are. And that's been, my journey over this last year is getting my head and my heart reconnected for who I am and who I was supposed to be and who I was meant to be. And I think that my ego, my pride, the things, definitely rattled my foundation. But being able to get back into it and realizing now that I want people to know me for who I am, not what I do.
Yep.
What would you tell somebody in that realm?
Well, it goes back to like everything around us is constantly changing. So if my identity was wrapped up, let's just say in my real estate success, boy, man, I would have had a tough identity crisis, man, because I lost more than almost anyone I know. But I mean, you got to be doing a lot of things to, I guess, lose more than everyone too, right?
Yeah.
So
you got to be doing big things to lose that much.
Yeah. So, I ended up losing millions of dollars on flips. And it just, once again, it's like, well, rates doubled. I was holding 50, 60 deal. Like, what are you going to do? And it sucked. It sucked really bad. And was I mad and upset about it? Yeah. Did it change my identity? Did I think less of myself as a person? No. I'm like, all right, what are we going to do about it? It's all good. And that's why it's funny, too, because a lot of people have told me, they're like, dude, like, to see your growth the last couple of years has been incredible. Like, things must be going great. I'm like, no, things actually aren't going so great. Like, like, it actually has been a nightmare navigating one storm after another, right?
It has been.
And they're like, well, it doesn't seem like that. And I'm like, well, yeah, because my identity's not wrapped up in any type of result-based thing. I'm not wrapped up in how many views I get or how many deals we do or how many businesses I start or stop or sell or whatever. I don't care. We could go get 100 deals today. I would be the same exact guy. I would not care.
It's good.
We could go and this video could go get 10 million views. I really wouldn't care. Doesn't mean like I'm not proud of it. Doesn't mean that like, I'm not going to, be stoked that it, but it's just like, it's not going to affect me one way or the other.
Right.
And that's when people realize their identity is wrapped up in a result, not an actual level of being. Because man, the results are always going to vary. What's the disclaimer? Results may vary.
Yeah.
That's on everything. So I'm not trying to be on a roller coaster the rest of my life. And that's what really happens when it's a results-based identity.
Yeah.
And then guess what, too? When you don't get the results you want, that's when the vices come into play. That's when you're like, oh, dude, everything's going to crap. Well, I need a temporary fix to feel better. Drugs, alcohol, women, whatever, right? I need something to make me feel better about myself. Yeah, I could go on and on about addiction, too, but it's just like addiction comes from like a temporary fix to whatever it is that's really going on in your life.
I know that all too well.
Yeah.
What's next for you? Like where's the journey heading?
That's a good question. I don't know. People are really like about getting like retirement and 5-year plans and 10-year plans and all this stuff. And I'm like, I really don't know. Like I look at every 3-year chunk of my life and I'm just like, wow, I didn't expect that. And so for me, it would be kind of like, I think it would be disobedient to try and plan my own life and steer where I'm trying to get it to go and not allow room for the Holy Spirit to work and pivot and direct me into wherever he wants me to go. So it's like, we have a pretty big nonprofit with Wealthy Kingdom. So I talked about what I do on the business side. And then, I'm equally, if not more passionate about the nonprofit side. And so, with that, like we've launched, I think we have over 80 Bible studies across the country. We have thrown big events. We've seen hundreds, if not thousands of people saved.
Will you unpack that? Like with the kingdom? I don't even know if I'm familiar with it.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Because it doesn't have the marketing dollars all my other stuff has. We need more donors.
Here, take mine.
Yeah.
What do you got?
I've been doing ministry work close to my entire life. Mission trips, Bible studies, leading, all this stuff. And last year I was just like, you know what? We need to use all the skills I've developed with all these other businesses and launch them for ministry. And so we did. And the first thing I wanted to do was build a community. So we did. So it's for Christian entrepreneurs. You don't have to be saved. If you're just seeking, you can go. All of it's free. We sell nothing. And by the way, I'm not afraid to sell. Okay. So like if there was a pitch, I would tell you. So Nonetheless, actually, I take the pitch is donate if you want. It's a nonprofit. So, nonetheless, we started, and I was like, I want to start these Bible studies because I had been hosting a Bible study in my office for the last 7 years before that, and I'm like, this works. Like, I have just seen it. I've seen so many guys with addictions be set free. I've seen marriages restored. I've seen people reconciled with their kids. I know it works. And by the way, you kind of asked the people speaking into my life. This didn't even cross my mind about like when I was going through tough times. It was meeting with my Bible study every week that kept me grounded, being around 10, 15 other men that I could be vulnerable with that were there to support me. And none of them were equal to me on a business level, but that had nothing to do with it. Right? So nonetheless, I'm like, we got to start these Bible studies. Like, they work. And so we did. And I got leaders. We created curriculum, hired a pastor. And so now, literally, we create a new curriculum every 4 to 8 weeks. And the entire world goes through it together, in our community. So we do that. Then we have a Monday call. I actually led the Monday call this morning. And so we do a live call every Monday. And so we had like 80 people. No, I think we had like 90 or 100 people on that call this morning. There's over 1,000 people in the school group. And so, we do all that. Then I started incorporating events because, as we know, at live events, life change happens. And I first started to do it in my own secular events at WealthCon. And so, I just one day was like, we're just going to do worship service. So smack dab in the middle of the event, I don't even tell people. I don't. We just have a worship service is like an hour and a half. It ain't even like this quick thing. It's an hour and a half of a worship service. I bring in a big name pastor. We do altar calls. We do healings. It's tight. And so that's my favorite part of the event. And so we just throw it in there. There's nothing on the itinerary about it. And
special guest speaker today at don't want to miss it.
Don't want to miss it. If you want to be healed, you don't want to miss this. So, I started doing that at my secular events, and then I held a Wealthy Kingdom event specifically called the Kingdom Summit. And so I got some of the biggest names in both business and in like the Christian world to come do it. And I had, for example, for anyone listening who might know some of these people. So like on the Christian world, I had some of the most famous people like Girls Gone Bible, Tim Ross, couple of pastors, big name guys, my friend Ruslan. They're all like massive influencers. And then on the business side, I brought a couple of my friends, and even Ed Milet came out to speak for free, which he never does.
Yeah.
And he's just like, I love what you guys are doing, man. Like, I will come out and support that. And so it was a one-day event. We went hard. It was just all day. And then I capped it off. My friend Jordan Feliz held a concert, and it was sick. So, we had 1,000 people at that, and 100 people got saved. I think the other 900 were saved, and they just got on fire.
That's awesome.
And, dude, it was crazy. And so we're going to be definitely holding more of those types of events on that front. I'm actually taking a break from throwing like a WealthCon every quarter so I could focus on throwing more of those and, just do less WealthCons.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'd love to know more about that.
Yeah, where do people find out more about that?
Yeah, wealthykingdom.com. They can go sign up right now. It's all free. They'll immediately plug into school. They can go watch the recordings. We got different courses they can access that are free. They can join a Bible study locally for free. Yeah, like the mission is just to bring the kingdom to the marketplace. Because I think what happens is so many times we, as Christians, expect the church to do that. We're like, oh yeah, just go to church on Sunday. Yeah. It's like, no, you bring the church to them. There's a reason I bring the service to the secular event.
Right.
You don't have a choice. Yeah. You're going to get to experience the Holy Spirit whether you want to or not. And it's all good if you want to leave. It's like, I don't care. But I'm going to bring the church to you. And that's the whole point with all this. It's like people don't just walk into church anymore. We have to bring it to them.
Yeah, that's a big deal, man. I mean, the model is still kind of, though, to condition people to come into our door.
Yeah.
Right? Come into our door as the church. We'll do the work. You just hand out the flyer, send the invite.
Exactly.
We'll do the work.
No, we should, and I have a sermon on YouTube. Maybe you guys can link to it. And I forgot what the title is, but the thumbnail says My First Sermon. And so I was at that event. I was just talking to people about, hey, look, you don't need to go to, a mission in Africa. You don't need to go do all these different things. Like, obviously, if you feel called to do that, it's great. But first and foremost, our entire mission field is our everyday life.
Right.
It's your coworker. It's the people you do business with. It's your employees. Those are the mission field. If you're not evangelizing to them, and if you're not a light and salt to them, then what's the point? You don't need to go to Africa.
Yeah, you said you've done like mission trips throughout life and stuff. I feel like in my experiences, short-term mission trips are more so for the people taking the trips.
Oh, for sure.
Like
they're for us. They edify
Yeah.
our spirit by going and serving and doing all those things. And obviously we're helping people too, but man, yeah, every time I get back from one, I feel great. We just held a mission trip. So at Wealthy Kingdom too, we set up mission trips that people can go on. So we just did one in Belize.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. We did one, we built a house in Mexico another time. And yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, when you think about that in the church world, right? Like bringing the church to people. I think that's one of the things I had a conversation with somebody the other day, very similar to the journey that I went through in rehab, is that once you're done, you have to go find the other ways to keep yourself safe and on track and all those pieces.
Yeah.
I think sometimes in the church world, it's the expectation when you're a new believer, you come in and this is where I'm supposed to get everything. And you talked about, like, you had that amazing group of guys that you could be vulnerable with. And in rehab, one of the things that I learned was finding your insulin, right? So you insulate yourself with people, like you talked about that core group of guys where you get vulnerable in and be real with.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I found this year is just finding the people that I can truly be vulnerable with. And that's where you're finding those spaces. So for you bringing it, the church into the business world is amazing when it comes down to that, because they need the guidance and the peace outside of the church.
Yeah. One thing I want to add to is, so like AA is obviously I'm pretty sure it's founded by a Christian, and it's obviously helped a lot of people get out of addiction, right? In church they have something called
Celebrate Recovery.
Yeah, Celebrate Recovery.
Recovery.
And so it's the Christian version, right?
Yep.
And I struggle with things like AA and worldly fixes to problems. And okay, I don't know your background.
No, you can go down the road.
Okay.
Good. That's the challenge.
Yeah. So on one hand, AA obviously works. I mean, there's lots of success stories from it, and I think it can provide temporary help. And it even might provide permanent help from like the addiction itself. The problem is it doesn't ever fix the root cause, is that number one, we're all sinners.
Right.
So we're all going to keep screwing up regardless. Right. So even though, for example, I was freed of my porn addiction 7 years ago. I haven't watched porn since. Does that mean I'm free of lust and I never like look at a girl again? No, that's not true. Right. So we're still dealing with our flesh and these just different things, no matter what. And the reality is, the Bible talks about this. The Bible has known about it, and the apostles and Jesus, they knew about it forever, that like, hey, you know what? No matter how good you are, no matter all these things, like you're still going to deal with tough problems. But here's the good thing. Like Jesus has forgiven you. Then, today, and tomorrow. And you don't have to walk in shame. You don't have to live in guilt. You don't have to live not knowing why you're even here on this earth, what happens after. We have the answer to all of that, right? And I think what a lot of these other ones fail is that they never fix the root cause in that, well, even if we get you off drugs, that still doesn't solve the issue that's always going to be this empty part of your soul that only Jesus can fill.
Yep.
We're all looking, like we know, I think almost everybody would agree, there is something spiritual out there within us. Only an atheist would really say, oh, none of that exists at all, right? But I would guess majority of the world, Christian or not, believes there's something spiritual at play. And so, if you believe the scriptures, it's like, look, there's only one way to get everlasting peace. And that's what we're all looking for at the end of the day. I mean, whenever we have let's say, a therapist in a counseling session, it's because we don't have peace. Like there's something going on in our lives that we need help with, and it's causing us discomfort and lack of peace. Same thing with addiction. Like, why do I keep struggling with this? I don't want to do it anymore. It's a lack of peace. Like everything comes back to this lack of peace, and it's like only Jesus can give you everlasting peace. That's what the Bible says. And so, though I think it can help in a temporary way, just like I think, ibuprofen can help me with a headache,
Right.
It's still not going to solve the issue of that. Well, until I actually do X, Y, Z, I'm going to keep getting headaches.
Yeah.
Until I do this, I'm going to keep feeling unfulfilled.
Yep.
So
I'm still on a journey, like what you just said with the AA thing. And the place that I went to was awesome because they were a holistic approach, right? There's all these different ways that you can get sober.
Yeah.
You have to find the ones that work for you.
Right.
And for me, like what you just said is that I needed to figure out where my head and my heart was disconnected. And I went through a lot of therapy, went through all the different things while I was there, right? Ultimately, Christ is still the foundation, but I still had to go through that process. And it was months where I went there to get sober, right? And then the months went on about staying sober until it finally became freedom from it, right? And I had this conversation with somebody recently where I don't want people to talk about my sobriety date or the things. It was a decision day that I made to get free of this thing in my life that was causing all this chaos.
Yeah.
And rather than it being, because I believe that there's this difference where some people, you trade your haze of whatever addiction that is for sobriety, which is just another form of prison. And it just comes down to the road. You're like, because now I'm sober, so I can't do these things because I'm this person, right? So I'm sober.
Your identity's in being sober.
Right. I can't be in Vegas. I can't be around these people that do these things. And last time I checked, like that's the places we're supposed to be to make that impact. And so it's been a freeing journey, and it's still ongoing. But I love what you said about that, is just kind of going through the place where you do find freedom and peace when you go inwards and you trust God in that process and you build that foundation off of that, rather than being so reliant. And I watch so many guys that come in, and like you said, nothing against AA. It's just a different mindset. And I've been to the AA meetings, and they're like, there's no inspiration in this place. It's a place of you have to do these things to stay strong.
Yeah.
You have to be at this meeting. You have to do these things. You have to do your steps. It's just a different form of prison.
Yeah, it's faith, right? I mean, you're putting your faith in this method,
yes,
that will keep you good, and if you deviate from this method, you put yourself at risk from not being good. And that's actually been also the same exact thing of most religions beyond Christianity, is that, hey, if you do these rituals, if you constantly do the stuff, then you'll be good, and if you stop doing these things, you'll no longer be good. And Jesus is like, no. Like, this is a one-time for all thing. Like, if you accept the Holy Spirit, you're going to be transformed from the inside out. You're not even going to want to do the things you used to do.
right.
And that's why I say it's like back to the root cause. Like, we can create all the different rituals and habits and things that will allow us to not drink, right? I can create all the rituals and habits that will allow me to make a lot of money. I can give the $1 million morning routine. I can give the $1 million script. And they will all work for their intended cause if you follow them and execute them well. But they still don't answer the root cause of like, okay, cool. Like, I made all this money. Now what? I still feel like unfulfilled. Yeah, there's a reason. Because that was never intended to give you everlasting peace.
Yeah.
And that in itself is the journey of from milk to meat, right? I mean, there's so many things that keep you dependent on this system. It could be an organized religion. It could be kind of those things that you have to return to over and over again until you become the hunter. You go out and seek. You find that freedom. You walk. You gather. Like, it's just a whole different amount.
Well, it also comes back with a statement of prison, because you deal with when you do stray or you do slip up or you do things, right? It's the shame and the guilt that you get that comes with all of it.
Yep.
Most of the time, not from your internal self, but from all the external validations that you're now a screw up, you've done all these things, and now you have to go back and deal with that shame and guilt from falling apart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just the big thing is, like, true transformation comes from a true identity shift, like you said, and you have to really pick what the identity is going to be. Because even if it's like you said, if it's just being, hey, I'm a sober person, that identity has its positives and negatives.
Right.
And, you know, as I said before, like at the end of the day, my identity's in Christ. But let's just take a normal, easy example of, hey, my identity is I am a husband, and I've been married 11 years now.
Right.
I'm not in a prison of that. Oh man, I can't have sex with all these girls anymore.
Right.
Right. It's like, no, like I don't even want to. Like, because I am a husband, because I am faithful, I don't even want to do that stuff. I want to just be with my wife.
Right.
And it's a different way of looking at it. And so I think a lot of people who break addiction still have not had the shift. They're like, yeah, I don't do drugs anymore, but man, I wish I could.
They trade one thing out for the other, or they're always looking back at the missing that part of life.
Yep.
And I think that's some of the stuff that I've just discovered over this journey this year.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, I know we got under your time. Thank you so much for letting us jump in here. I'll let you take us out of here, Steve, in a second. I just wanted to say thank you.
I guess the question I would have for somebody that, when they're going through that rock bottom, that transitional where they're trying to become somebody else, what advice would you have for them, as they're making that journey? Maybe they're in some struggles right now. They're trying to come out of something. What would your advice be for somebody like that?
Yeah, I think people can predict my advice at this point. But no, because look, at the end of the day, it's funny. So I've interviewed lots of people on my podcast. I've interviewed psychologists. I've interviewed, guys who've got brain degrees. I don't even know what they are, right? Like these guys could tell you everything you need to know about rewiring the brain and all this stuff, right? And to me, it's just funny because in my mind, it's a very simple answer. It's like, you just give your life to Christ. And they're like, well, yeah, but you could do this and this and this and this and this. I'm like, no, it's like actually it's like honestly the answer to everything. Like you got money problems? Give your life to Christ. Because you could go join my program or whatever else, but that's still even if we fix the temporary problem, you're still just going to have the next problem. It all starts with first fixing the root problem.
Yes.
And if the root problem is fixed, the Bible tells us that money's not going to be the issue, right? Like God says he'll always provide for us. So I would rather do that first, knowing that then God is going to lead me to figure out how to solve the money issue, right? It's like the chicken before the egg. People are always like, yeah, I'll start going to work out once I'm in shape. And it's like, people say that all the time. They're like, I'm going to hire a trainer, but I got to get in shape first before I'm ready for all that.
That's kind of like my wife when she cleans the house before the cleaners come.
It's stupid. I hear it all the time. I'll start going to church once I get my life together. And that's just how people think. And so I apply that to everything. It's like, yeah, I can't go to church because, I'm an addict. They're going to judge me. And it's like, no, that's exactly why you need to go to church.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So for me anyways, it just comes back to, I don't care what you're going through, addiction, financial problems, marriage problems, bring it all back to fixing the source. And what I believe, and I've just been a testimony of my whole life, is that you will not have all the answers right away. But if you put your faith in Jesus, he will lead you down to solve the problems and see you through the answers and put people in your life who can, help you. And, so for me, I think it just starts with praying for Jesus to come in your life. And that's what it comes down to. And I could pray for everyone too and whatever, but it's like, that's the answer.
Yeah. And then once that foundation is set, I think that's the other piece to it, right? You set that foundation, you give your life to Christ, and then not everything is easy after that.
No.
You still have to do the work.
Yeah. And once that happens, it's now not just you deciding by yourself, hopefully I'm making the right choice to do this. You have a partner. You have the Holy Spirit with you who's smarter than any other mentor I know, okay? And the Holy Spirit might be leading you to go to AA, right? That might be the answer. He might be leading you to Celebrate Recovery. You might be cured of the addiction instantly. I've seen that happen too.
Sure.
I've seen people who have had demonic spirits of addiction, and the moment they were saved, it was gone.
Yeah.
I just give you an example. I talked about being addicted to porn 7 years ago. I struggled with that my entire life, even as a believer, right? And one day, and I tried to pray and I tried to like stop and all this stuff. And I remember one day at Bible study. This is why I know Bible study works. And, our leader was like, hey, we're not going to do what we were doing before. I actually felt like the Holy Spirit was calling me to talk about something else because we're going to talk about porn. I want everyone here who's struggling with it to raise their hand. So a bunch of us raised our hand. He's like, we're going to pray for deliverance for everyone in this room individually. We're going to lay hands. We're going to do that. And so, we did that. Each of us confessed individually to what we had been doing, how often, like really out there. And then people came and prayed for us and laid hands. And I kid you not, from that day forward, the desire left. Right after that, it was gone. And I dealt with it my whole life. To this day, I'm not tempted by the things I used to be tempted by. If I'm alone in a room, it's just not even a thing anymore. It used to be a huge struggle. If I'd be on the road, it was a struggle. It no longer is anything. And so you got to ask yourself the question, did God just magically rewire my mind and my brain chemistry to make me no longer addicted? Or was there spiritual forces out at play oppressing me that were removed?
So good. Man, thank you so much for your time today and just being here and speaking truth and all the things. And I'm just so grateful for you and I'm looking forward to connecting a little bit more often with some of this other stuff that you're doing. So thank you.
Yeah, appreciate you guys for having me.
Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you.